Hello everyone, we have done from volume 1 to volume 4, also understood various advanced outlines and the commonly used phrases, did the practice of the same in the members only videos. To join the membership, click the join button which is next to the subscribe button on my YouTube channel. In the last video, we started volume 5 and today we'll do the dictation of transcription number 92, 93 and 94. You don't have to take the dictation of all these transcriptions in one go. I have included the timestamps in the description for your convenience. So get ready everyone. Transcription number 92. The speed will be 90 words per minute. Get ready. This question, sir, in my humble opinion, should be viewed from a different angle from which it was looked at and discussed here yesterday. It is true that it is correct in principle that the railways, whose entire capital at charge is drawn from the general revenues, should be able to make a good contribution to the general revenues. But in applying this principle, care must be exercised. If we are looking at railway systems in advanced countries like the United Kingdom or the United States of America or any such country, this principle no doubt could be applied on all fours. But in a country like India, whether it could be applied is a question that should be considered. It was argued that the railways have a long history, and because they have long been an established concern, they should now be able to contribute to the general revenues. Although it is true that the railways are a long established concern, still the circumstances under which the railways were run are not being examined here. The railways, as we all know, before independence were run not on a welfare state basis, but they were run on the system of strategic lines. When the railway lines in India were formed, it was not the question of developing economic resources, it was not the question of linking up industrial centers, it was not the question of linking up the railway system with pilgrim centers or centers of density that prompted the authorities, the private companies to start the railways in India, but it was the strategic concern of the British government then that prompted these companies to form railways. The question of arriving at a correct pattern of railway system from the point of view of developing and exploiting the natural resources of the country from the point of view of developing the backward areas of the country is still there to be examined and to be attended to. Well, from this point of view, as anybody can see, there is much scope for developing the railways. In fact, there is so much pressure on Honorable the Railway Minister for new lines that one will be at a loss as to where to find the resources from. They have undertaken in the second part of the 5-year plan to construct new lines of 1500 kilometers in length. in order to have a perfect railway pattern to be able to exploit and make use of the natural resources of the country to the fullest extent. Although we cannot dismantle the railway lines that we have now, still these lines have to be linked up to fulfill that requisite of exploiting the natural resources. So, my point in bringing out these arguments is to show that the railways have a full development program on their hands and they need funds. They can no longer draw from the general revenues of the country as the railways finance is separated from the general finance. They have to obtain the resources that are required for development either by loan or otherwise. There is the other need also to be examined in this connection, the need of passenger amenities both inside these houses of parliament as well as outside. It has been agitated that passenger amenities are required to be given in a larger and larger number. The second class passengers before independence did not get adequate amenities. In fact, the condition of the bogies, the condition of the waiting rooms, the condition of catering facilities, and the condition of housing, all these things needed much attention. Although the railways have now taken up the amenities program, and according to the recommendation of the convention committee, we are now earmarking rupees 3 crores per annum for this purpose. Still, I think it is totally inadequate. The railway administration has now recognized the fact that greater and greater passenger amenities are to be given, but they are not going on the right lines. I may make this statement clear by saying that they are not following proper lines with regard to the amenities that are to be given. I will take just one example and point out how they fall short of the requirements. Well, the question of providing waiting halls for second class passengers has been a much mooted question, and that naturally gets a top priority in the amenities program. Well, the so called waiting halls that are now provided are like this. The halls are there, the exit gate from the platform opens into the hall, and the entry gate into the platform opens into the hall. So much so that, in fact, the hall is only a passage. When people come and go, how can the second class passengers take rest here? That is a question which I have not been able to understand. Secondly, for the passengers who have to wait for a number of hours in these halls, necessary sanitary facilities should be provided. Now, the sanitary arrangements may be inside the platforms where the waiting passengers cannot go. And if they go and commit nuisance outside, the policeman will be there to haul them up and prosecute them under the police regulations for committing nuisance. So it is not imagined that when passengers are required to wait for 10 hours or 12 hours in these waiting halls, they should have some bathroom facility as we have for first class or for higher class passengers. That thing has not been visualized. Even for our cattle sheds in our houses, we have doors and windows, but here for these second class waiting halls, there is neither a door nor a window nor an enclosure. This I say to draw the attention of the authorities to think of these amenities in their proper proportion. Their estimate of the requirements of funds for these amenities is an underestimate. The needs for increasing the amenities are large. Stop, translate and check. Get ready for the another transcription. Transcription number 93. Sir, coming from the south, we are very happy that after a prolonged struggle, after a good deal of suffering by the people, and after several movements have been conducted by the people's representatives, Pondicherry has become one with us, though not still according to law. It is gratifying to know that the people of Pondicherry and the surrounding French settlements are very happy about their being reunited with the motherland, and it is in the fitness of things that the government of India has come and asked for sanction of expenditure there. With regard to Pondicherry and other French settlements in the south, what the government of India has been doing and what the chief commissioner has been doing have won the approval of all sections of the people. Pondicherry has been going through very, very difficult times, and there have been uncertain political conditions for the past so many months. And it is really surprising how the law and order situation has been so successfully tackled, and how the people, after a very long time, have been assured of perfect law and order in that area. Pondicherry has been notorious for the disturbances, and in the past 2 months, the situation worsened because of lack of cooperation between the administration and the people, and it is after a very long spell of time that the people of Pondicherry are enjoying a stable government. The government of the day and the chief commissioner have been doing their best to establish perfect and cordial relations between all sections of the people. The chief commissioner is also trying to give the people of Pondicherry a perfect democratic setup. So it is not true to say that he has been doing things which are not in the interests of the people or which are not conducive to democratic functioning of institutions there. All the political parties which have been openly siding for the merger have been recognized, and it is with them that We have to get along till elections are held in Pondicherry, till a final decision is made by the people whether they would be with the Indian Union or not. Till then, the government of India have done a good thing in nominating people's representatives to official positions so that there may be better collaboration between the people and the government. It has also been said that they have provided enough money for carrying out ordinary repairs and also for medical facilities and other amenities that are necessary to the people of the place. I would like to refute the allegation that the government have been partial to one political party and are trying to dominate other political parties which also worked for the freedom of the people. The government have been taking a non-partisan attitude and have recognized the claims of the people. It is the people who have to finally decide, and the people's representatives have been given the recognition. All the political parties which were working for the merger of Pondicherry with the Indian Union have been recognized, and the predominant political party of the day, which did contribute greatly to the merger movement, has been given recognition, and that has the approval of the people. Moreover, it is untrue to say that the police is trying to dominate and is trying to force the people to submit by the use of bayonets and arms. The police is there to protect the people against the onslaught by undesirable elements in the area. So the police are doing a very difficult but a responsible job, and the people of Pondicherry have no complaint, and most sections in the settlement fully support the move of the government. Pondicherry will be with us soon, and we hope that the people of Pondicherry will vote for the merger of Pondicherry territory with our own. It was said that at Pondicherry and other places, certain political parties which worked for the liberation movement have been ignored and that they are being suppressed. It is not so. All the political parties except the Indian National Congress, which was having a branch there, were formerly with the French government, and they did not want freedom. In the past 2 months, they voted for the merger, actually, the de jure transfer of power from the French administration. Today, Pondicherry is able to get along well with the other sections of the people, and the people have welcomed the merger with great relief. It was the people who were suffering, it was the common man, it was the worker, it was the ordinary people who had to depend on the mainland for the supply of necessities. They were put to a lot of difficulty before, and now they have got almost all the necessities of life supplied to them at a very reasonable cost. Now there is free movement of these essential things, and the people of Pondicherry are very happy about it. There was only one section grumbling about in Pondicherry, and that is the merchant class. They have made a complaint that with the stopping of licenses to import, and also due to the cancellation of many import licenses, they have been put to a great loss. They have been the worst sufferers because they will have to fulfill their contracts. I would like the Honorable Minister to consider this aspect, that whether the licenses that have been granted by the previous administration can be held valid, of course, subject to the financial interests of our country, because people also take this opportunity to cheat the government of India of their legitimate share of taxes and also the import duty. Similarly, there is one irksome feature which has been the subject of many a complaint by the people of Pondicherry, and that is the customs barriers still exist. There are lots of people who are going to Pondicherry every day, and these people are being put to a lot of customs difficulties. Stop, translate, and check. Get ready for the another one. Transcription number 94. In the course of the discussion, it has been very ably pointed out by a large number of speakers as to how the rubber industry is in the grip of certain foreign elements and Indian monopolists at the top. We know that there are small planters and producers, but the hold of the Dunlop company was also mentioned. So far as the big industries are concerned, it has been their policy to capitalize the money and to put money in the reserve fund instead of utilizing such funds and profits for improvement of the working classes and for the betterment of the laborers. It was pointed out yesterday that the Dunlop company gave very high dividends. You will be shocked to know that while the company had money to declare a dividend of 40% and also to capitalize a part of the profits, it did not give at all a fair deal to the workers. On the contrary, they were kept at more or less the same old level where they had a kind of labor, practically speaking. Therefore, it becomes necessary to look into this matter. Sir, we are interested in the increase in production, and everybody is interested in the increase in production. The production of rubber, coffee, or of any other essential commodities or imported commodities must undoubtedly be increased in the country, but merely by appointing a board or by taking certain powers into the government's hands or investing the board with such powers, you cannot ensure increase in production. There may be slight improvement here and there, but materially you cannot alter the situation until and unless you inspire the real producers by making them see through their own lives experience that increase of production means a constant rise in their standard of living, in their material and cultural well being. Now, that is why I say that it is very essential when the board is really being given certain powers for looking after the interests of the working class to make these powers effective, and to make them effective would be to ask the board to work for the increase of the wages of the rubber workers or the laborers who work in that particular industry. Now, that is not there. It is a very unhappy omission and a very sad omission if the intention of the bill is good. Sir, as you know, we had been told in the recent days very much about socialism, and we are not talking about socialism in its big aspects here at all. This is not our concern here. But if you at all really have such feelings, if you think that socialism is something which one has to swear by, even though the ideas of socialism were first propagated 1 century ago, then give some expression to it. But we know that there will not be socialism at all under you. All that we say is, if you swear by socialism, talk about socialism, if the members of that side of the house go to some other houses and hear lectures very seriously, they should come here and tell us that they are also going to increase the wages of the workers when such measures are brought up. Such occasions are good occasions for them to begin to cultivate this thing, because you have yet to learn the ABC of socialism first, and you cannot write a book or a poem or an article straight away, and we do not expect you to do it either. But if you are really sincere about what you are talking, you should try to learn the ABC. That is to say, begin with giving the workers a fair deal, giving them a living wage, and dealing with the workers here in this bill. You should make provisions for them. I do not suggest to the minister that in this bill there should be provision that so much wages shall be given to the rubber plantation worker, or fix a scale and all that sort of thing. All that I have proposed in this amendment is that the board should be given that reorientation of outlook, should be given the direction that the wages have to be increased and that they have to consciously work for it. That is all that I demand in this amendment. Sir, we do not like that our workers should be exploited by the people, and he will not deny, because it has been pointed out from that side of the house also that huge profits are being amassed. They cannot spend the money. The British who are earning out of this industry cannot spend the money with all their luxury and extravagance. They cannot spend that money here in this country. They send this money abroad. Even then, they retain some money in their hands. They would rather keep them in banks idle than give this money to the workers for bettering their lot, for improving their conditions, which determines in the final analysis whether the production of the country would go up or not. Now, sir, I read with great interest the select committee's report, especially the portion of the evidence appended to it. And I would ask you also, sir, to reread if you have already read this interesting document. You see here Mr. T. T. Krishnamachari crossing swords with an important representative of the British interests, the British rubber interest in this country. Now it is all a wordy battle. It is a sort of very interesting competition for being smart, one trying to overreach another in smartness. But at the same time, out of these discussions, it emerges that the British interests are totally unmindful of the interests of the workers, of the interests of the country as a whole. Although the British gentleman who came here to give evidence spoke of national interests and all that, here you will find many interests. Stop, translate and check. For doubts, you can write in comment box, and you can like, share and subscribe my YouTube channel. Thank you.